One of the fortunate things that I have in my life, not only personally, but as someone who thinks about these things, is I have a remarkable marriage. I have this 42-year marriage that has been an absolute romance. I mean, the point that I always make about it is that my wife and I have literally had one fight 35 years ago, which lasted under a minute. And we have had this kind of romance going on. And one of the experiences that has taken place in the course of that marriage was that you start out with a woman, my wife was incredibly beautiful and I was turned on and I thought this was great. And then you start to think, as most men think about women, well, this woman is obviously out of her mind because she's saying things that make no sense. She has the capacity to reason. And then slowly, if you pay attention, you start to realize, oh no, a lot of what she says doesn't fit in with my way of thinking, but is in fact true. And then it's like putting on those red and blue glasses that they give you in 3D movies. Then suddenly you start to see that you have become a bigger person with a full scope of a view of the full world as it actually is, which you couldn't have by yourself. It is only through this complementary relationship that you develop that full thing. And the second thing you learn, and this is really important, is that all this talk about subjectivity as if it were the same thing as imagination, or as if it were all relative and you think one thing is good and I think another thing is good, is complete crap. I mean, it's complete garbage. We see things that are subjective, that are real or not real. You think you're in love, but you're not. So you were wrong in your subjective judgment. But that means you could be right. I was right in my subjective judgment. I picked up my wife hitchhiking. She literally sat down in my car and I thought, there she is. That's the one I've been looking for. And I was right. That was a true subjective observation. So really, the whole journey of life is having your subjective world come into collaboration with the objective world. And then you are living a full, rich, and I would say spiritual life. And that only really happens through love. I mean, that's why the Bible is so big on love. Why they keep saying that? Because it is, you find that when your inner life and your outer life are in league with one another, that's the experience that you're actually having, is the experience of love. And so all of these things are so important and so profound and so normal. They're so normal that people have ceased to see them. It's kind of the old ball and chain, and now I'm married. I used to have sex, but now I'm married, and all this kind of the old comedians, all the jokes comedians make, which does happen to a lot of people because they're not paying attention and they're not living at that extra level of life. But we have to sell that extra level of life because it's what we're talking about.
Honestly, right. So I think that what you've just done there is actually the best way of selling it, right? Because often the right definitely falls into the sort of masculine trap of thinking, well, I have logic and reason on my side. And so I will simply make a cast iron logical argument that you will be compelled to agree with. But actually, that's not how persuasion works. And actually, as you were saying, this sort of personal testimonial saying, well, look, I have a 42-year-long marriage that is magical and beautiful, and just expressing how, I can see it in your face, that this is something you truly believe and that you truly get so much out of. And that, I think, is far more persuasive to a young person, or anyone really, to say, well, actually, this is what it did for me. My worldview did for me. And just think about it, and I think the left, this is where the left, I think, recruited best with their sort of testimonial style. Because I remember when, the Huffington Post would first start publishing my experiences as a black woman in tech or something like that, right? And I'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. But that was very persuasive to the audience they were looking for, right? And I honestly, what you were just saying, that I will probably clip that out of this interview and put it on social media, because I think that is something that young people want to hear, and they want to know that it is possible, and they just need to know, okay, what's the foundation I need to build upon to get to that? Because that's a romantic story. It's genuine romance. We don't have to rely on logic or browbeating. And getting to the point you made on love, I think this was something I was going to mention a minute ago, but it kind of slipped my mind. The right's messaging should be rooted in compassion, right? The left lies about their compassion always, and they use it as a very, very slippery and clever mask. But I don't get that impression from people on the right. I genuinely believe they have actual compassion for people, And that's what drives them to try and set the rules, right? Because as I was saying about the rules, they're difficult to set, but you want to set good rules because it's not compassionate to leave people rudderless, is it?
No, and you're so right about this idea that we depend on reason and truth. There's that Paul Simon song, "I want some tenderness beneath the honesty."
Yeah. And it's the famous Ben Shapiro quote, right? And don't get me wrong, it was a funny quote, very relevant a few years ago. But actually now,
Well, Ben and I have gone around the corner on this, and even Ben will admit that I've humanized him a little bit. Of course, facts matter, but feelings are what we're here for. As I was listening to you, I was thinking of this politician we had here named Paul Ryan, who wanted to cut entitlements, which is a necessary thing to bring the debt down. We have to do it, but nobody wants to do it because everybody wants the free stuff. And Ryan used to stand in front of a chart with a pointer, and he used to explain how this was working and all this stuff. And so the left made a video in which Paul Ryan pushes an old woman in a wheelchair off a cliff. I thought, well, that's how that's done. So like I've been an artist all my life, and I really had to, for 20 years, I've been pounding the left. You've got to pay attention to what people like me do. You have to support it, not just with money, never mind the money. I'll make a living somehow, but you've got to support it with reviews and awards and appreciation. And you can't constantly be saying, oh, there was a nude scene, I must shield my eyes while you're watching Game of Thrones, because we know you're watching Game of Thrones. So, let me tell stories about real life. This has been a very, very hard fought battle. But after 20 years, I can say that when I started making these speeches, they used to look at me as if I had landed, like I was the man who fell to earth. But now they call me and they'll say, what were you talking about? Because obviously we've lost the culture and we need to get it back. This is why culture matters so much. It's why the arts matter so much. It's also why the way we live matters so much. Like if you're cheating on your wife, that's part of the culture too. If you're abandoning your children, that's part of the culture too. The culture of divorce has been an absolute disaster. I keep saying to people, Jesus never mentioned homosexuality, but he said a lot about divorce, and he said, don't do it. That is the thing he said. Yeah. And that blows up children's worlds. And when I talk to young people, I can almost always tell which one of them come from divorced families, because they're lost. Their planet blew up. The planet they were living on exploded, and no one has taught them how to walk on the ground again. It's all about the culture, and I think we do ourselves a disservice when we forget that, because we think we can fix it fast through politics, and we can't.
Yeah. So how do you think the right can reformat their messaging to frame it on the grounds of compassion rather than logic? Because this, I think, is the right's. I think that's genuinely the right's great failing, and I think it's their great challenge for the new century is say, look, actually, we are coming from the heart. How can they do that?
Well, I think we're going to have to accept the notion of hierarchy, and this is a very hard thing because the left has demonized hierarchy. They say, you say that a heterosexual relationship. The word hierarchy means the judgment of the sacred. It doesn't mean something's better than something else. It means things are closer to the center, essentially.
Sorry to interrupt there. Yeah. I've been thinking about this, and I was thinking actually we could reframe hierarchy in terms of belonging, right? Where something belongs. And because I think belonging, again, for lost young people, that might actually have been an attractive force. It's like, look, you belong in a relationship together. This, the hierarchy will sort itself out. My wife is, I flatter myself to think that I'm the head of my household, but we definitely belong in the same relationship, So, right, but sorry, Karen.
Well, I think that was a good example, though, in a relationship. I consider myself the head of my household, too, but because my wife's happiness is all in all to me, if you look at our lives, she has gotten all the things that she wanted out of life, while bringing me dinner. It's an amazing thing that she has kept her priorities in order, and I have kept her priorities in my heart, and that actually works really well. But what the left always says is you're being unequal. You're saying that it is better to be a straight couple than to be a gay couple. And I will absolutely say that it is more closer to the center of human life to be a straight couple than to be a gay couple. But the world doesn't need everything to be at the center. I think it's more at the center of human life to be garbage collector than it is to be a concert violinist, but we wouldn't want to we can't live without the garbage collector, but we wouldn't want to live without the concert violinist. So there are many beautiful things that aren't at the center, but we have to maintain the center. It's really interesting. All my life, I've always thought that I serve the ordinary person. I'm an artist, which makes me weird. It makes me elite. It makes me kind of offbeat, but I'm here to entertain the person who does the things that are necessary to be done. And a lot of artists basically act as if those little people don't matter. If they don't understand their art, then that's their fault. They must be racist. They must be sexist. They must be some kind of phobic. Well, no, it's your job to entertain them. They're paying your salary, so you should entertain them. Those are all things about being at the center and being at the outside. An artist is at the outside of society, but that doesn't mean he can't be part of society, and a beautiful part of society. Those are the ways we have to talk. We can't adopt the language of the left because they're so good at polluting the language and lying. And as you say, it's amazing how compassionate they sound until you disagree with them. And then suddenly you're dealing with Attila the Hun.
Yeah, you've never met people so cruel as a leftist dealing with a black Thomas Sowell fan. I've never seen any, and it's cruelty. It's genuine malice. And I mean, I've never treated anyone in my life with the kind of venom that I see coming out of leftists who feel that they're dealing with essentially class traitors, race traitors. And it's just like, whew. But I love the way you're framing this, because I've been thinking about this a lot as well. The right needs to essentially capture aesthetic language. Talking in terms of beauty, and cruelty, you can, this sort of framing, the left is actually completely off their guard on these. And like you're saying, a brilliant way of framing it, by the way, the center is the normal area, but all the beautiful things are on the margins a lot of the time. And that's innately flattering to those people who feel themselves marginalized. So it's very persuasive. You can see how you can generate a sense of sort of noblesse oblige within the progressive elite. Actually, maybe these people aren't so bad. Maybe you should see yourself as a bit higher than them in a hierarchy, rather than trying to see. Because one of the things I was studying Nietzsche not so long ago, and he's got this great point where he's like, look, it's immoral to argue that the lamb should be like the hawk, but it's also immoral to say the hawk should be like the lamb. And so we've got to accept that there is a distinction here, and it's not wrong for them to be the things that they are. And that's what I think we do need to make the progressives understand. It's like, actually, you're something beyond their understanding, right?
Yeah, I think that to say that people are in different places in a society is in no way to devalue them at all. And essentially, and this is the important thing, it is true that each of us is this important thing, and that is true of even the people who are useless to society in some sense, like the homeless guy or the schizophrenic or the person who's ill and has to be taken care of. We do remember that this is the basis of the faith that founded the West, that we are here to respond to that person in his moment of need. But that doesn't mean that we are here to discount the good that people do for society and the tension between the individual and society. That's another thing. It's kind of an interesting, it's because Marx polluted Hegel that we have forgotten that idea of tension and resolution is at the core of life. So when somebody says, and how often have I heard this? Some guy says to me, oh, I've turned 45. I've got to leave my wife for this 20-year-old girl so that I can be myself. You say, well, actually, no, actually, no. Part of who you are is married to this woman who has taken care of you all this time. And so you actually have to not do that in order to be yourself. You have to restrain yourself from what your flesh desires and be something else. Those tensions are part of life, and they're an actual creative and beautiful and extremely painful sometimes part of life. And what the left wants to do always is side on one side, and they think that they're giving you something. You think they're giving you something. You think, oh, I'm giving you the freedom to sleep with anybody you want. But then if she happens to get pregnant, you have to kill that person, and now you feel bad about that, and so now you have to support killing people, and now suddenly you're killing a baby 10 seconds before it's born, and that's who you become, and now you need the government to take care of you because you have no money because you're allowed, and so they're really selling you slavery all the time. They're always selling you slavery with a happy face.